Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is David Nabarro, and I'm moderator. We've got a really full program, so if you'd like to sit down, we can get going straight away. And it's with an extraordinary joy that I introduce my friend, Deputy High Commissioner Kelly Clements, to give us her opening remarks. Kelly, you have the floor.
Thank you, David. Greetings to everyone, Excellencies. Thanks for joining this particular high-level event, Multi-Stakeholder Pledge. It's really an exciting opportunity, and I want to particularly thank the co-leads, World Food Programme, FAO, and the Government of Norway. There's been a lot of work that has gone into this particular pledge, and I think the collaboration that we've engendered just in preparing for this event and this day, there's going to be quite a bit of momentum, I think, that comes out. And if somebody could grab the door, I think that would be helpful. Since 2019, I'm going to give you a few numbers. I don't think I'm going to be the last person to do this, but a few numbers. You heard yesterday, obviously, we're looking at 114 million forced to flee. This has been a number, unfortunately, that has almost doubled just in the last few years. Global food security, of course, has escalated, skyrocketed, in fact, in these 4 years since we met in 2019. You know the reasons: conflict, climate, COVID, of course, and economics. And in 2023, the estimates are 345 million people are expected to be acutely food insecure across the 78 countries where this kind of data is available. And we know that food insecurity and forced displacement are intertwined and linked. Assets, productive assets, are lost, destroyed, livelihoods, in some cases, non-existent, and economic opportunities and incomes are, of course, seriously impacted. And climate change, of course, compounds all of this insecurity and displacement. Refugees and displaced are often barred from accessing land or jobs or livelihood activities. They, in some cases, are particularly vulnerable to food insecurity. And when we see economic downturns in many parts of the world, they are at times the first to feel and pay the price. Refugee food security is largely dependent on the legal frameworks that exist for refugee rights, including access to land, employment, financial services, financial inclusion, just the ability to be able to connect financially to bank accounts and other ways to transfer resources. 67% of refugees have the right to work in 2023. But the practical implementation of what that means in those contexts falls very much short. Land use for agriculture, of course, is a critical factor, with only 54% of refugees legally entitled to use land for agriculture, and only 56% enjoy full recognition, like I said, to open bank accounts with financial institutions. So the legal frameworks are key. In 2023, we estimate that only 6 in every 10 refugees enjoy freedom of movement under the law. And this, of course, becomes important when one talks about markets and other ways to make a living and find that food to be secure. The shortfalls in humanitarian funding, we've talked about this extensively, including outside the walls of this forum, the serious impact on women and children in particular. There's a cycle that is very hard to break between conflict, displacement, food insecurity, decimating livelihoods, and so on, with the climate factors that I mentioned. And at this time, of course, refugees in at least 17 countries receive less than minimum standards to meet basic food and nutrition means. And some of the areas that most concern us at this moment are places like Bangladesh, Chad, Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan, South Sudan, Niger, Tanzania, and Uganda. But we know, too, that humanitarian aid alone is not the answer. And so policy reforms, of course, are quite important to think about the humanitarian development piece to this. and having just come from another multi-stakeholder pledge related to humanitarian and development cooperation, this is really fundamental. So we're here to address the food security challenges together, to break some of those silos, to ensure that we have refugees displaced right at the center in terms of that voice, with governments, with civil society, with private sector, and with international financial institutions to help us find solutions. We've got the blueprint through the compact, and we see that this multi-stakeholder pledge is our chance to intensify what has become a really strong collaboration, strong partnership. Thank you to those refugee host communities and governments that have done so much. I know there are several pledges that have been made already in the last 2 days. New pledges on land access, on employment, on financial inclusion, and that, of course, we hope to grow and build on, but those are absolutely fundamental. And we've got two host governments on the panel with us today, Uganda and Chad. You'll hear shortly about how they're taking this on so seriously and importantly. And again, my thanks to WFP and FAO for joining, and Norway for joining this collaboration and fight, and we want all of you to join us too. So thank you very much, David, and thanks, colleagues. We hope we have more pledges coming out of this.
Very good. Thank you. It's always very reassuring to be opened by Kelly Clements. She helps us see things like they are. Your leadership is just remarkable. I'd like to now do a brief introduction to our panel this afternoon. Our title is Towards Durable Solutions, the Transformative Power of Agriculture and Food Systems. Our panel lasts for 90 minutes, slightly less now. There'll be 30 minutes for each sub-panel. There'll be 2 of them. And there's also an intervention from a refugee, and there's time for pledging interventions from all of you at the end. Translation is available from English to French and English to Spanish and vice versa. And also there will be headsets located in the back of the room near the entrance. Channel 1 is English, Channel 2 is French, Channel 3 is Spanish, and there are QR codes on the banner outside the room which helps audience members to have further information about the pledge. Well, I've just come actually from just over 2 weeks in Dubai, where I've been working flat out with a number of stakeholders on what's going to happen to agriculture and food systems as the world heats up. And I think it doesn't need too much commenting from me, just to remind everybody here that climate change is going to provide very challenging situations for people's food and nutrition security, also people's water security. And that's why we saw agriculture and food come right into the center of the discussions in Dubai, with 159 countries endorsing the Emirates pledge on sustainable agriculture, food systems and climate. And so it's so important. Let me just introduce the key speakers who will be with us on panel 1. First of all, Honourable Dr. Rimrana Bright Quantore, Minister of State for Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries from the Republic of Rwanda. Uganda, thank you. That would help if I could just get out of that one. Then His Excellency Dr. Jean-Pierre Baptiste, Ambassador and Permanent Representatives to the United Nations Office in Geneva for the Republic of Chad. Got that one right. And then Valerie Guarneri, Assistant Executive Director of the United Nations World Food Programme in Rome. And then Nikita Chandaria, who is Co-Chief Executive Officer of INSTA products in the middle here. Welcome to Nikita. Now, I'm going to start by inviting Honourable Minister, the Honourable Assistant Executive Director of World Food Programme, Valerie Guarneri, to offer some brief opening remarks. Valerie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, David, and I'm delighted to be opening the panel discussion and really highlighting why the multi-stakeholder pledge on agriculture, food systems, and food security is so important in today's global context. We know that forced displacement is both a driver and a consequence of food insecurity. Displaced people are more vulnerable to food insecurity and malnutrition, having had to abandon their livelihoods and assets, undertake difficult journeys, as Kelly was highlighting, and settling in areas where they often find limited access to basic services or their former social networks. Their rights may be restricted, resulting in a lack of access to land, labor markets, and freedom of movement. And last year, nearly 20 million refugees and asylum seekers were hosted in 55 countries that were themselves experiencing food crises. So we see how these issues come together. Now, we also know and have been discussing through the forum the overwhelming responsibility for the protection of refugees falls on countries, on lower and middle income countries who host 75% of all refugees, with least development countries providing asylum to a fifth of all refugees. Often the infrastructure in these countries are already overstretched and poorly equipped to support these large numbers of new arrivals. I think any country would struggle to support the numbers that we see. And this puts extraordinary pressure on limited resources and on host communities. The Global Compact on Refugees underscores the commitment to burden sharing, to ease the pressure on hosting countries, enhance refugee inclusion and self-reliance, and supporting durable solutions. And humanitarian assistance is critical to supporting refugees and meeting their basic needs, but clearly alone, it is not enough, and it is certainly not the answer. Improving food security in displacement context is multidimensional. It requires the actions of many actors, governments, donors, UN, civil society, private sector, and affected communities themselves through a systems approach. And this systems approach needs to consider and address the very particular challenges faced by displaced populations to address issues related to land access, food production, distribution, and consumption. So recognizing the importance of agriculture, including agricultural livelihoods, this multi-stakeholder pledge aims to really galvanize efforts to collectively improve the lives and livelihoods, both of refugees and their hosting communities. Building from experiences and learning over the past 4 years, significant new commitments have been made to increase land access, to develop agricultural value chain, to expand market linkages and more in order to foster food security, resilience, and self-reliance of refugees and their hosting communities. And this panel gives us an opportunity to showcase local experiences and new commitments to expanding refugee engagement in this space so that we can be enhancing food security and self-reliance of refugees. I'm looking forward to the panel, and I hope you are too. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Valerie, for setting the stage, but also for your own personal leadership and the work of WFP. And now it's with great pleasure that we invite the Honourable Minister, Dr. Ramirama Bright Canyon Torre, who is Minister of State for Agriculture, Animal Husbandry and Fisheries, and he's in charge of animal industry for the Republic of Uganda. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, distinguished participants. Uganda, you must be aware, Uganda is hosting the largest number of refugees in Africa. We have 1,600,000 4,813 registered refugees. And the first thing the refugees come, when they land in Uganda, the first thing they need is food. It is also a fact that while the donors have been supplying food to the refugees, the supply has been going down. And the ration they receive is not enough to even last several days. So aware that agriculture, food production is the source of livelihood for host communities, Uganda, working with partners, took on the role of helping these refugees to also engage in agricultural production, especially for seasonal crops and vegetables for their food and nutrition security, to supplement the already dwindling food supplies from UN agencies. So like my previous speaker said, we in Uganda, we have inclusive policy where refugees alongside with host communities are supported. And we observed that actually refugees were selling labor for their food. So Uganda is making serious interventions alongside with partners to make sure that refugees use government land to produce food for institutional security and also include them in the value chain. So we plan to, we already pledged to cover about 300,000 households for both refugees and host communities. So we include them in education system, and we really need a lot of support from donor groups, because the budget we require is about $50 million per annum if we have to sustain it. And to make sure that when the refugees, at the end of the day, when they go back, when they are healthy, when they have got education. We also try to include them in the value chain system of agriculture. Our policy of government is agro-industrialization, and we support the farmers from the production to post-harvest handling to value addition and marketing at all stages. So the refugee policy in Uganda is such an interesting that we are actually catering refugees alongside the host community. And therefore, I would actually encourage people, countries, and donors to support this program, because it's stretching us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was super clear. The point made. More than 1,600,000 refugees being hosted in Uganda, and a real effort being made to strengthen the capacity of host communities and households through supporting their agricultural production. Beautiful. And now I'd like to move to our second panelist, who comes from Chad. Jean-Pierre Baptiste is Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the UN in Geneva for the Republic of Chad. And to you, sir, we'd be very interested indeed for you to talk about why it's so important for newly arrived refugees and their host communities to have access to land. Over to you, sir.
Tout d'abord, merci. I will talk in French because my English is not so good. Donc, je voulais tout d'abord vous remercier pour l'invitation devant cette auguste assemblée et vous présenter un peu ce que fait le Tchad en matière de réfugiés. Je suis sûr que beaucoup d'entre vous ne pourront pas mettre le doigt sur la carte quand on leur parle du Tchad et qu'ils voient la carte de l'Afrique. Je sais, ne me dites pas non, je sais qu'il y en a beaucoup qui ne savent pas. Un pays qui se trouve au centre de l'Afrique. Si vous voyez la carte de l'Afrique, mettez votre doigt au centre de l'Afrique, c'est le Tchad. 1 284 000 km² pour une population de 17 millions. Et pour lesquels nous avons accueilli et nous accueillons depuis une dizaine d'années des réfugiés provenant de la Centrafrique, provenant du Soudan actuellement. Uniquement pour le Soudan, nous sommes à plus d'1 million de réfugiés. Pratiquement au Tchad, une personne sur 16 est réfugiée. Donc imaginez le contexte pour un pays qui est à moitié désertique, et nous avons eu la possibilité d'aller avec le haut-commissaire aux réfugiés, la Banque mondiale et l'ambassadrice des États-Unis au Conseil de sécurité visiter ces zones-là. Je peux vous assurer que la situation, on ne peut pas la décrire. Vous imaginez un flux de réfugiés, on ne peut pas donner un chiffre. Pratiquement, nous avons près de 20 000 réfugiés par jour qui entrent au Tchad. Donc tout ça pour vous dire que notre situation est très complexe. Mais malgré cela, des efforts ont été faits aussi bien par le gouvernement tchadien que par les partenaires, notamment la Banque mondiale, le HCR et tous nos partenaires, l'Union européenne et tout ce qui s'ensuit, pour essayer d'améliorer la situation. C'est bien, c'est même à la limite, en tant qu'ambassadeur du Tchad, je suis très content de cette réponse. Mais la solution, c'est aussi d'arrêter la guerre au Soudan. Tant qu'il y aura la guerre au Soudan, nous allons continuer à avoir des réfugiés, nous allons avoir des besoins qui vont augmenter. Ce n'est pas seulement le Soudan, ce petit pays, ce grand pays, le Tchad. À droite, vous avez le Soudan, pays en guerre. Au sud, vous avez la Centrafrique qui était un pays en guerre. À l'est, les coups d'État au Niger. Au nord, la Libye. Vous comprenez que nous sommes entourés, avec un pays qui n'a pas accès à la mer, nous sommes entourés de problèmes et nos problèmes dépendent de nos voisins. Et tant qu'on n'aura pas la paix dans ces différents pays, les choses ne changeront pas. Donc, malgré cela, malgré les difficultés, le Tchad, juste après le début de la guerre au Soudan, a adopté une loi portant protection, définition et protection des réfugiés, une loi portant protection et des personnes déplacées internes que nous avons commencé à mettre en œuvre. Parmi l'application de cette loi, on considère actuellement au Tchad, on ne fait pas de distinction entre les réfugiés d'un côté et les Tchadiens de souche de l'autre. Ça, c'est le premier point. Nous avons promis dans nos engagements, d'ici 2017, à octroyer pratiquement 30 000 hectares de terre dans les zones d'accueil des réfugiés. 30 000 hectares d'accueil. Je vous prends juste une ville comme Adré pour que vous compreniez, 100 000 habitants, nous avons 200 000 réfugiés. Donc, qu'on le veuille ou pas, on est obligé de transvaser ces réfugiés ailleurs pour qu'il n'y ait pas de conflit communautaire. Donc, je voulais féliciter donc les organisateurs pour nous permettre d'échanger et voir surtout progresser cette importante question sur la sécurité alimentaire qui fait partie intégrante de l'agriculture. Et vous connaissez, pour un pays comme le Tchad, l'agriculture est la première mamelle de notre pays. C'est la première source de revenus pour le Tchad. Donc nous essayons actuellement, avec l'agriculture, en insérant les réfugiés, permettre à ces réfugiés de se nourrir. Le seul moyen est de lutter contre la famine et tout ce qui s'ensuit, c'est de permettre à ces réfugiés de se nourrir eux-mêmes en cultivant. L'erreur que nous avons faite, je ne vous le cache pas, au début, on a mis les réfugiés à la frontière soudanaise sur les zones de culture des populations hautes. Et actuellement, aussi paradoxal, personne ne vous dira ça, mais aussi paradoxal que cela puisse être, les réfugiés sont dans des meilleures situations que les populations hautes. C'est pour ça que nous disons systématiquement aux partenaires qui visitent notre pays, si nous appuyons les réfugiés, commençons d'abord à appuyer les populations hautes. Donc, nous avons besoin d'un soutien adéquat pour aider notre économie à se remettre d'abord après la pandémie du Covid, ensuite l'évolution des marchés, les denrées alimentaires qui augmentent. Il faut dire que la sécurité alimentaire nous renvoie également à la question du droit à l'alimentation comme un droit de l'homme basique et fondamental. Ça entre dans notre, disons, déclaration des droits de l'homme, mais dans la déclaration des droits de chaque Tchadien et de chaque personne venant dans notre pays. Droit à l'alimentation égale droit basique. Donc, tout ça pour vous dire qu'on pourra épiloguer pendant des... Je m'écarte un peu du sujet, mais on peut épiloguer pendant des heures et des heures. Mais ce que nous pouvons dire que la faim limite d'abord le développement humain et donc nos capacités à atteindre nos objectifs de développement. Donc l'insécurité alimentaire est devenue le leitmotiv du gouvernement par rapport au développement de notre économie, par rapport au développement de nos populations. Je ne vais pas être trop long, mais pour vous dire que les réfugiés, aussi paradoxal que cela puisse être, ont les mêmes droits que les Tchadiens en matière d'obtention de terres, en matière de culture, en matière d'agriculture. Et quand je vous dis que 300 000 hectares seront transmis à ces réfugiés-là, ça prendra, c'est vrai, ça prendra 2-3 ans, mais au moins ils auront cette autonomie de cultiver pour les cultivateurs et une économie d'élevage aussi avec... donc voilà, en gros, j'ai fait un discours assez simple pour vous permettre de situer d'abord mon pays et les problèmes que nous rencontrons. Et je voudrais par la même occasion remercier tous les partenaires qui nous aident dans le sens du développement de notre pays et dans le sens de l'accueil et la protection des réfugiés, en leur disant que nos frontières resteront toujours ouvertes. En ce qui concerne l'afflux du réfugié, on l'a prouvé avec le Soudan, on l'a prouvé avec le Mali, on l'a prouvé avec la Centrafrique, on l'a prouvé même avec le Niger. Je vous remercie et je m'excuse d'avoir été aussi long.
Thank you very much indeed for your very clear statement that really it has to be based on the right to food, and also Chad remains open to people who need security in your country. Thank you again. And now we move to inviting Valerie Guarnieri, who's a member of our panel, to tell us a little bit about how WFP, which has been both meeting humanitarian food needs and trying to help communities build resilience and self-reliance, including hosting communities, what is the WFP experience of operationalizing this nexus approach in practice? You have the floor.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And Ambassador, you should turn the microphone up there. Thank you so much for this opportunity to come in. And you know, in reality, we are certainly doing a lot, assisting 12 million refugees in 44 countries as part of our partnership and engagement with UNHCR. We have also made a commitment that we're following through on, that 20% of the flexible multilateral allocations that we get will be dedicated towards addressing and filling pipeline gaps in refugee programs, and so we're doing that, and we're prioritizing those allocations together with UNHCR. But while we're doing a lot, we are clearly not doing enough. And I think hearing, as Uganda did, as Uganda minister said, that there are ration cuts for refugees, hearing as the ambassador and permanent representative from Chad highlighted that there are new influxes that require additional support. There needs to be a greater commitment and allocation of resources for refugees. And in this context of growing needs and shrinking resources, we need to appreciate that and address it. But we also hear more clearly than ever that it's simply not enough to keep feeding refugees and meeting their basic needs. We have to be investing in the right policies and practices that build self-reliance and reduce needs over time, and that's really the focus of our discussion today. At the World Food Program, we have been linking with the government pledges here at the Global Refugee Forum in a few particular ways, and I'll just share a couple of quick examples on this. First, in Uganda, where we have certainly been cutting rations for refugees given inadequate funding, we have been working to support 100,000 of the refugees there to strengthen and improve agricultural value chains working with government and partners, while also linking cash transfers that are provided to refugees with financial inclusion. And this gives a pathway to the durable solution. In Chad, as we were hearing from the ambassador a short while ago, we have come alongside government's commitment to expand land access for refugees, to work with UNHCR and the World Bank to improve agricultural production, create jobs and economic opportunities, and strengthen resilience for refugees and their hosting communities. And in Kenya, which is not on the panel but certainly very much here with us today, government includes refugees in their local development plans, and we are supporting 10% of the refugees in the country to meet fully or in part their food needs and nutrition needs by 2027. These are some of the clear examples of how we're working in this space. It's a selection of commitments to support governments, refugees, and hosting communities to meet today's needs and support tomorrow's solutions. We're committed to expanding collaboration and partnerships in this direction. I think we need to recognize that it takes time, it takes more investment, and it takes the full commitment of partnerships. Thank you.
As somebody who's worked with the World Food Programme for several decades, I can totally concur that partnership is what's needed, but also partnership is the way in which WFP works. It's now with pleasure that we move to hear from Nikita Chandaria. Nikita is co-CEO of Insta Products, which is a major manufacturer of a number of brilliant therapeutic foods, including ready-to-use therapeutic foods. And we'd like to invite you to share with us why it's important to include local private sector actors in the refugee response, and what can be done to make it easier for companies like yours to engage. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's been a very strong argument made today and in earlier sessions as to why including the private sector is important. When we start to look at refugees not only as recipients of aid, but as contributors to the communities that they're in, this makes it quite clear why the private sector needs to be engaged, right? I won't go too long onto that, that argument, because I think it's been repeated a few times, but I will speak to why us as a company, why we went in and started this partnership with FAO and WFP. So we're actually now in about year 4 or 5 of one of these projects, so I can share some really real life examples to what this looks like. So we're in quite an interesting space as a company, because we're a private for-profit company, but our customers are the likes of WFP and UNICEF, right? Therefore donor funded. And what we see every year is that the human demand for the product that we make, which is a malnutrition product, or it treats malnutrition rather, is so much larger than the funded demand. We're never able to actually reach every last child that requires this product. And as a company and as a family, we sat down and we said, okay, we need to start looking at alternative solutions here, because this problem just keeps getting bigger. And we wanted to start looking at the core problem, which was food resilience. And it's food resilience in, of course, as some of my panelists have mentioned, for background, I'm coming from Kenya, which is both a host community for a large population of refugees, but also faces a tremendous amount of food insecurity itself. And so we wanted to work with communities that were recipients of our final product. What we did was we looked at Turkana and we said, can we start purchasing some of our inputs here? Can we offer sustainable incomes to the families, to the farmers? The idea would be that if you are growing a high-value, highly nutritious crop, you can feed your children and your families some of this crop. You also save some of the payments in the meantime, and this is inherently building economic but also food resilience in the communities. Now, when we first visited Kakuma, there was a man who approached my father, and he asked him for one of these machines. So he was making this movement. We're wondering, what is this? He goes, I want a money-making machine. My dad's like, what on earth are you talking about? He's talking about a foot pump, because water is an income. With water, he can grow, and now he can start to sell. And that's an income for him and his family. Now, what's important in that is that a lot of the thinking, right, we're talking about public-private partnerships. From the private sector, we've got a very one-way track of thinking. Things have to be economically viable. From the humanitarian sector, you have to help as many people as possible. You have to find the overlap in that partnership for this to work. And what's interesting about this was when we first started engaging with FAO, we had a bit of difficulty to find what that way forward is going to look like. Because if we start looking at every farmer who's spread across the county and trying to make an impact everywhere with the most people possible, it's never going to be able to scale. And to prove this point, we needed to find a community that we could work with that was a concentrated effort from which we could prove that, one, farming in Turkana is possible, that the market is there and available and stable, which would, in our case, we were lucky it was us, but building that trust. And then from there, you can build in and start with your connections to other markets. Now, if the private sector, so to answer your second part of the question, if the private sector is left as the last piece of the puzzle in this situation, what you'll end up with is a situation we see a lot in Kenya, where massive efforts and investment goes into growing mangoes, for example, when the market wants avocados. So the mangoes, they sit and they rot. Please engage with the private sector right from the very beginning and ensure that you are running in parallel, because the private sector is your relay partner. When you're ready to scale up these projects and build in that long-term resilience, the private sector is there to take on those problems. Thank you.
That was super good. Thank you. A lovely story, and then a very, very clear request. Engage us early. Don't wait till you've planned it all and then bring us in at the end, because it's not the best way to work with us. Thank you again. And now we're going to have a video from Rhoda Daniels, who's a former farmer field school facilitator who has worked with FAO, and she's also a Sudanese refugee. She lives in Kalobey refugee settlement in Kenya, and she's sorry she can't be here with us today, but let's now hear from Rhoda Daniels, please.
My name is Rhoda. I was born in Sudan. I left my country because of the war in 2012 when I was still very young. We had to flee for protection of ourselves. I arrived in Kenya in 2013. At first, I lived in Kakuma refugee camp, where we met a woman who took me under her custody as a caretaker and managed to enroll us in refugee schools. That's where I first learned about agriculture. I found it so interesting, and I loved it because I love sciences. I moved to Kalobey settlement in 2012 to find a job, and that is where I made Food and Agriculture Organization, which was implementing and working in agriculture. Refugees have limited opportunities to earn income, and accessing food is a challenge. Most of our neighbors in the settlement rely on cash assistance, but due to the recent cuts in rations and the increase in price of food items and other basic needs, it's not enough to even cover our most basic needs. But agriculture is changing everything. It has really upgraded the lives of refugees and the host communities here in Kalobey. Refugees are growing these crops in their own gardens, and many of them now rely on their own food production. They do not depend on food assistance anymore. In our trainings, we also teach refugees and host communities how to cook nutritious meals and how to preserve food. We teach them also how to dry vegetables so that they can store them for long periods of time and be consumed when there is not enough food, which is very important in the current context of drought and scarcity. Agriculture is also helping break barriers among the refugees and the host communities. Nowadays, you can even see refugees and host communities doing business together in the markets, and we all benefit from each other. Despite the obstacles, agriculture has made a real positive impact on our lives here in Kalobey settlement. It has helped us to rebuild our lives, and this is what I have experienced. This is the power of agriculture.
So everybody, this panel is about the power of agriculture in enabling people everywhere to access the food they need. We heard from Honourable Minister from Uganda just how central agricultural support for host communities as well as refugees is to enable his country to welcome more than 1,600,000 refugees. We heard from Chad how the Chad approach to receiving refugees is based on the right to food. We heard from Valerie Guarneri very clearly how the WFP, World Food Programme, is working with refugee communities not just to provide them with food, but also to help them access the means to produce food for themselves. We heard from Nikita Chandaria that the private sector is a very important partner, but involve the private sector early. And Rhoda Daniels explained how, in her work in Kalobey refugee settlement in Kenya, agriculture has proved to be such a wonderful aid, especially given that the cost of living is increasing. And so local solutions matter. And now we move to our second panel, which is about how to facilitate local solutions. And for this second panel, we've invited the following to be with us. First of all, Andreas Motzfeldt-Kravik. His Excellency Andreas Kravik is State Secretary for in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway. We've also got with us His Excellency Saeed Mohammed Al-Etter, who is from the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Global Initiatives Program from the United Arab Emirates. And Saeed himself is Assistant Secretary General there. We've also got the honour of being joined by another CEO, this time Per Hegenes, who is CEO of the IKEA Foundation. And then another really experienced colleague, somebody I've worked with for years, Director of the Liaison Office to Geneva from the Food and Agriculture Organization, Dominique Bourgeon. And we're going to go to each person in turn, but we thought we might benefit from inviting Dominique to give us brief opening remarks to help us frame this second panel. Dominique, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, David, and indeed delighted to say a few words at the beginning of this second panel and to speak after we indeed heard about so many significant commitments that are being made by government, by UN organizations, by the private sector. I was very much your point on being on the importance of running in parallel for the effort of the private sector and support to refugee. I think it was a very important one, Ms. Chandra. And so I think this first panel indeed was critical as part of the discussion on the importance of local solutions. But this said, we also heard about the challenges that are still there. And we saw that indeed those local commitment toward refugee inclusion is essential. And we have seen the many very important examples that were made. However, it is clear that collaboration at all levels is also required if we really want to tap the full potential of agriculture and food system to benefit refugee and the refugee hosting community. And this was the point that was made by His Excellency the Ambassador of Chad, the importance of the host communities. Now, in our second panel, we'll shift our focus to explore the ways in which resource partners, as well as other stakeholders, UN and non-UN stakeholders, can champion innovative approaches, support their testing, and of course, the key is always in being able to scale up some of these promising initiatives. We will reflect on the importance of building partnership and investing in long-term, durable intervention that move refugees away from dependency and towards self-reliance. And as part of that, and it was already the case in the first panel, of course, the pivotal role of agriculture in this pathway will be again at the center of this second conversation. And I give you back the floor now, David, to
Thank you very much indeed, Dominic, as always. And now we go first to His Excellency Andreas Kravik, because Norway has been a leading food systems advocate for years and has advanced these kinds of partnerships. From Norway's perspectives, what are the ingredients of a successful partnership to advance food security for refugees and host communities, especially in terms of inclusive approaches and livelihoods? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to my co-panelists for lots of insights and very many good points. First, let me just say that I think it's critical that we're clear-eyed about the analysis and what is really transpiring. We're seeing a rising flow of refugees. We're seeing more food insecurity, and we're seeing that leading to more instability. So I think those are the correlations that we're seeing. And I think the underlying argument here, or the underlying cause, and there's been a debate about this in various multilateral fora and between various states. You have climate being a driver of climate being a driver of refugees. You have human rights violations. But I think armed conflict is at the core of what is now driving these massive flows of refugees that we're seeing. Last year, 2022, was the deadliest year on record since 1984. And there's no coincidence, I think, that we're also seeing a record number of refugees. So I think the most important thing we can do going forward is to reduce the number of conflicts that we're seeing. That requires calibrated thinking and us spending capital on political capital, spending resources on conflict prevention and also conflict mediation. And that's something that is at the core of Norwegian foreign policy. But we also need to think short-term to medium-term. And as part of that, we need to address the challenges that we're faced with in the context of food insecurity. And that is at the core of our approaches when it comes to our humanitarian efforts. And furthermore, and this I think was alluded to by several of the individuals who spoke before me very eloquently about anticipatory action, about risk reduction, and about creating resilient communities. And that's also something that we're trying to prioritize. And also, we can't just say that we're prioritizing this. We also need to put the funding that we have where our mouth is, so to speak. And that's something that we're trying to do. And during COP, my development minister announced $35 million US dollars approximately for the WFP's flagship program on combating crisis prevention through preventing food insecurities. And let me just, I'll just read what she said when she announced that, because I think it's pretty informative. She said, "This is a program that will never make headlines because crises are better anticipated and managed. Helping farmers to salvage crops and livestock in advance of droughts or floods help to ensure that people have food and income. This is how we help to reduce or avert crisis." And I think the key word here is that, or key concept here is, will never make headlines, although that's what I'm trying to do now, but I think it's difficult because we're, as politicians and as countries, we're incentivized to challenge or channel funding to ongoing crises. And it's always difficult to be able to prioritize emerging crises or preventing crises that are in the making, because if you're successful in that regard, no one will know that you're, it's difficult to score political points. And that's, unfortunately, that's something that we also need to take into account, and that's also, I think, a conversation that we need to have in order to incentivize countries, governments, and also non-state stakeholders, the private sector, in order to facilitate more funding allocated towards preventing conflict, preventing crisis from occurring. So that's something I think that we need to keep in mind. And also, one final point is I think we also need to indicate or showcase or show our appreciation and our gratitude to those countries who are taking in massive inflows of immigration, of refugees at the current moment. We have Uganda spoke about this. We have Chad who spoke about this. And I just want to really thank both of their governments for all their things that they're doing. And we're trying to do our part in terms of supporting those governments and other governments who find themselves in a very, very difficult situation. So we are now proud to announce that we're allocating $3.5 million through the UNHCR and the WFP to help to the work that's being carried out in Uganda when it comes to enabling some of the refugees in terms of building resilient communities and ensuring that they can establish themselves, at least temporarily, in Uganda in a way that is conducive to communities that are peaceful and that can coexist with the local population, and also that can operate in a environmentally sustainable fashion. So I'd just like to take again the opportunity and thank those governments for everything that they're doing, and also to thank the UN and also not least the private sector for the companies that are stepping up, because I do think, as was alluded to here, that we need more collaboration between the private sector and the public sector, and that's also something that we thoroughly want to appreciate and give our thanks to. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. So Norway offering dependable support in ways that really tune in to the issues that we're discussing in this panel. Thank you very much indeed again, Your Excellency Andreas Kravik, for just giving us this clear line of support from your government. I'd now like us to hear from panelist His Excellency Saeed Mohammed Al-Etter, who's Assistant Secretary General of the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Global Initiatives. These go under the acronym MBRGI. And MBRGI has had Ramadan campaigns offering 10 million meals in 2020, and these have advanced to the 1 billion meal endowment in 2023. An extraordinary thing, and I was going to ask you, Your Excellency, if you could please tell us about the inspiration behind these campaigns and also MBRGI's future engagement, which will be focusing increasingly on food security and sustainable agriculture for refugees and displaced communities. Thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you, Sir David, for having me, and all thanks also goes to my colleagues here also on the panel, and the refugee challenge is increasing day by day, as everybody knows, and to combat such a bigger challenge, we have also to come up with some kind of innovative also ways of pushing back this challenge and of helping all the underprivileged communities and the refugee communities also globally. Actually, Mohammed bin Rashid Global Initiatives, Mohammed bin Rashid, the Vice President and Prime Minister and Ruler of Dubai, Mohammed bin Rashid Global Initiatives only in 2022 have allocated more than $381 million to the underprivileged communities and also to humanitarian relief globally in more than 81 different countries. And I'd like to shed some light on some of the tactics we have used through the last 3 years. We started maybe after the pandemic in 2020 to focus more because we were even shocked to find out there are some people in the pandemics, even in UAE who need some food, like taxi driver who earns his living on a daily basis, or a laborer who earns his living on a daily basis. When everything freezes, when the economy freezes, even he cannot go back to his country. You have a problem also in some developed country like United Arab Emirates. So the inspiration came from there. And His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum has a call out to everyone to participate, and it was, alhamdulillah, a big success. And the second year, we distributed more than 220 million meals in 30 different countries. And the idea there was to do a call out for everyone to participate. Everyone can be part of it, even a student in a school, with 1 dirham, which is like around 30 cents, he can donate 1 meal. And we have now tens of thousands of people in UAE who are subscribing to, a monthly donation to these campaigns and to provide also food for refugees. And being one of the also donors and being one of the partners of UNHCR, our relationship goes back a long time. We have supported the relief program with many refugees communities. We have supported also UNDP. We have some sustainable solution also with FAO. Also, when it comes to in Nigeria, they have like this agriculture, schooling, and sustainable intervention for these refugees. We have partnership also with Unit Life Trust Fund, also who support more than 300,000 also refugee. We also we also partnered with the World Economic Forum to launch something called Food Innovation Hub. And in this hub, we bring everybody, like the entrepreneurs, the academics, also the investors, and also the foundations, different foundations to come together and to think of some innovative solutions for this challenge, because the challenge is getting bigger by the day, and we have to come up and to have to cope with different and new innovative ideas every day. And one of the ideas out of this Food Innovation Hub now, we are building 2 factories, actually, date factories in Dubai. Dubai and UAE have lots of dates and palm trees, lots of them. You'll see it everywhere in the streets. You'll see it with big farms. And we come up to, we find out that this is a very cheap way also to produce a fortified food that's good for malnutrition mothers and babies all over the world. And inshallah, next year it will be in operation. And all of that has been done also in coordination with UN agencies. And I'm happy also today to pledge, to announce that Mohammed bin Rashid Global Initiatives is pledging extra $16.5 million also to the refugee communities worldwide in 8 different countries in coordination with UNHCR, and part of it, 11.5 will go to different countries in Africa and in Asia, and $5 million will go also to address the needs in Gaza also, and also to continue and to sustain this kind of donations also. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid have announced creation of a donation. Of an endowment, creation of an endowment with initial, seed fund of $300 million, And the idea there is to make sure that we sustain these kind of donations to UNHCR, to FAO, to WFP, to all these agencies, because the challenge is growing by the day, and we have to be innovative also in combating that challenge. Thank
That
you.
is amazing.
Thank you.
So another increased commitment announced, and this is just exactly the mood we need to get in. We're pledging here because it's such an important area in which to pledge. And the IKEA Foundation has been championing private sector engagement in refugee responses in East Africa for some time. And I think we're delighted that Per Hegenes, CEO of IKEA Foundation, is with us, because we're going to invite him to tell us more about their work supporting sustainable agricultural livelihoods for refugees. And what lessons have you learned along the way? You had the floor, sir.
Thank you, David. You want to start with the pledge? No, we'll start with the work that we have done. IKEA Foundation has, over the last 15 years, invested a significant amount of money in driving agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa in general, because 70% of Africans work in smallholder farming or in farming in general. So if you want to look for an opportunity to help farmers and help people increase their economy and lift themselves out of poverty, this is a good place to start. Now, we also look at this from a foundation angle, which means that as a foundation, we have a unique strength in the ability to take big risk in early stages of developing new models and thinking differently about how we can achieve more impact for less money. So we typically work with partners in the early stages and see how we can approach things in a different ways. We can be more successful. We can help more people with the same amount of money. So in the agriculture sector in general, we focus on how we can not only increase the yield for smallholder farmers, but also help them do that in a more regenerative way, which means that it's good for the farmer's income and is good for the sustainability of this earth, because we have to change the way we produce food in the future in order to be even close to achieving the goals that we were discussing last week in Dubai. Right, David? Food and land use is 30% of the total climate footprint, and if we don't fundamentally change the way we eat and produce food, we will not get there. So going back to the refugee space, so it's been extremely interesting for us to look at agriculture as part of helping refugees and host community lift themselves out of poverty, because agriculture doesn't only provide an opportunity to create jobs and improve the income for people, but it's also a great opportunity to create that social cohesion between host community and refugees and have them work together on farming the land and sharing the crops. Because working together makes friends and drives collaboration as opposed to the kind of conflict we are used to. So whenever we work with refugees in countries in East Africa, which is our focus area right now, we would always do 50% refugees and 50% host community and use that as a way to improve the entire community and not only the refugee community. And thanks to the very generous collaboration with some of the countries in East Africa where we work, Ethiopia, Uganda, with generous refugee policies, we were able to actually achieve quite unique impact in situations where you normally wouldn't even think it would be possible. So I give an example of that. In the very south of Ethiopia, in the Somali region, we worked with UNHCR and the Ethiopian government to actually irrigate land that's basically, I would say, it's a barren land, it's unproductive land, it's desert type of land. And the only way to actually drive farming and therefore income generation in that area for both host community and refugees is to irrigate the land. So we irrigated 1,000 hectares of land that gives work for about 2,000 families and gives them an opportunity to not only work together and produce more food and therefore create food security, but also increase their personal economy and bring refugees on a road to self-reliance, which is the main purpose of all the work we do for refugees across the world, whether it's in farming or in other areas. Now, in this context, we were able to achieve better food security, increased income for people, but also establish a business opportunity, a livelihood opportunity that otherwise wouldn't be available there. So what's the learning? Well, one learning is significant, and that's the learning of the impact of climate change. Because when we started this, the main purpose was, of course, to be able to farm the land by providing irrigation systems that actually could fight the drought problems. Now, today's world, we don't only have drought problems, but then we have huge flooding problems afterwards. So you have torrential rain that basically floods the whole area and takes all the harvest out. So you wipe off the harvest, even if you have irrigation systems. So suddenly, we have found new challenges in terms of how can we work on this to actually protect the refugees and the host communities from these dangers. So I think that's one example. Second example, we work very closely with the Ugandan government. They're very generous on providing settlements for refugees. We do programs with the Ugandan government, with UNHCR and the AFSI Foundation to actually, again, develop different models for how we can engage refugees in food and land use, but also in other areas, through a graduation model and a market system development model to make things sustainable, to get it to a level where people can take care of their own future and they're not dependent on any aid. And finally, but because you're here, Nikita, I have to say that I'm very proud of the fact that together with FAO and INSTA, we funded the early stages of the development of a program which is not only extremely important because it's more or less the first time groundnuts are being farmed in Kenya, but the groundnuts are essential ingredients to this therapeutic food that Nikita was talking about, which actually is normally known as the plumpy nuts. They're really important therapeutic food that we give to malnourished and undernourished children to bring them back in stability. And I think this will be the first time that these plumpy nuts are not imported from the outside, but they will be produced in Africa. And you know, that's what we want. We want to shift the production to the countries and make the countries do these developments themselves instead of being dependent on import. So bottom line on learnings, it's a lot of challenges. We fail and we succeed and we go ahead and we get to a point where we leave it to others to scale, which is something that you can do. But the biggest learning, I think, is that unless you engage the private sector at an early stage, you will not be able to scale. And the scaling needs to happen with people who understand scaling, understand business, understand value chain, and understand that there are certain markets for certain products, and we need to make sure that we meet the market's demand because that's how we can be profitable.
Thank you, Per, very much indeed. This has been a very, very instructive panel because there's been lots of good learnings, and now Dominique Bergeon is going to tell us a bit about FAO's experience of how agriculture can reduce dependency on short-term assistance and coordinate to durable and contribute to durable solutions. Dominique Bergeon, you have the floor.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, David, and indeed very, very informative panel. And perhaps I will take you back to the video which we saw. And Rhoda, the lady who was speaking, she said something very important. She said, agriculture can change everything for refugees. And in that respect, I think it's important to keep in mind that most of the refugees, actually a large number of them, have an agriculture background. So they know about farming. But even for those who don't have an agriculture background, I think it's a good opportunity to quickly learn new skills. And by learning these new skills, they will be able to improve their food security situation, which is often problematic. I mean, you refer to the issue you are facing, for example, in Uganda, in being forced to cut the ration, etc. So agriculture can improve their food security situation, can contribute to a better livelihood, generate some income, can contribute to economic inclusion. So this is absolutely critical, and therefore, I mean, agriculture is important. And for Rhoda, I think this was clearly, I would say, a vocation for her, not only to work to improve the food security of her family, but also to be involved in the community and to transmit those skills. But it's important in the meantime to keep in mind that agriculture is complex. Agriculture is not something you do like that. No, agriculture is very diverse, and I think when you engage even with refugees, it's very important to understand first and foremost refugees, of course, and host communities, what are their expectations, but also to understand very well the agri-food systems in which they operate, to jointly with them identify the best possible options and therefore help them thrive. And this is why at FAO I think we are really committed to make our, FAO is I used to say a technical organization with its boots on the ground, and we are really committed to make our full potential in terms of knowledge management, in terms of being able to know what are the diverse options that are available, but also our geospatial potential and our data to really be able to program, to make the appropriate programming in terms of what can and what could be done in different locations. We have seen that indeed refugees have told us very clearly. I mean, they want to reduce dependence, and but I mean, once we have identified the what to do, I think the important is to say how we are going to do it, and in how we are going to do it, I think again over the last 30 years, FAO has developed, starting in Asia, this farmer field school approach. Farmer field school is a methodology by which basically you learn by doing. So you have farmers coming every week for a season long to learn agricultural practices. So it's not about just repeating what you were doing, but learning improved practices, learning technologies that will enable you to adapt to the challenge of climate change, that will enable you to grow groundnut in areas where you were not growing groundnuts before, and to know the techniques that it requires to be able to work in irrigated areas. So this farmer field school is very important, and basically recently a beneficiary for those farmer field school, Betty in South Sudan, was telling us that really the skills that she has learned have been very important in that respect. But so now, as you said, the key is to be able to go at scale for that. How are we going to go at scale for that? And for that to happen, first of all, we need more generous pledges, such as the one that are being made by countries like Uganda and Chad, but many others, Ethiopia and others, to really be able to provide opportunities to the farmers. We need, of course, the right legal environment in place. This is very important. We need flexible and multi-year funding from our partners. I mean, such as, for example, the IKEA Foundation, Norway, the European Union, and many others. And finally, we need strong partnership among, of course, the UN organization, in this case, FAO, UNHCR, WFP, but also partnership, of course, with the private sector. And I keep really this notion of moving together really in parallel to make sure that we meet your needs, working, that refugees and all communities are really connected to your needs, and that we can indeed together go at scale. Thank you, David.
Well, thank you, Dominic. That was beautiful. And so now comes the moment when we invite very short interventions, 1 minute, in which pledges are made by governments or by other entities, and a cordless mic will be brought to you. There are some who've already said they want to speak, and I'll list them. Representation from Ethiopia, Finland, South Sudan, Philippines and Mali. Obviously, if anybody else would like to come in, it'd be joyous to add you. We started late. We're going to ask whether we can go on for 10 minutes extra, so till 15:10. So please don't hold back. If we've got the microphone, I'd like to go to the delegate from Ethiopia, if you'd like to speak, in the front row with the red tie. Thank you. I'll set my buzzer starting now. Thank you.
Thank you, dear moderator. Thank you, speakers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to join you to present our pledge of 2023, which is dealing on agriculture and the food security system. So regardless of the global various challenges we are facing, the government of Ethiopia constantly maintains the commitment of opening its borders, offering refugees to those seeking protection by obeying to UN and OAU conventions and the protocols, and adoption of Ethiopia's new refugee proclamation in February 2019, following the first GRF, which held in 2019. As a result of adoption of the proclamation, an enormous result has been achieved by support of ICAO Foundation to provide livelihood engagement of refugees and host communities through developing 1,000 hectares of land on irrigation farming systems. Hence, scaling up this experience, making it to 10,000 hectares, the government of Ethiopia is pledging as one of its second edition of GRF 2023 commitment to provide access to 10,000 hectares of irrigable land through lease arrangement and promoting climate-smart agriculture and livestock value chain, contributing to improved food security and the socio-economic empowerment of refugees and host communities based on its appropriate legal and policy frameworks. Thus, on this occasion, the government of Ethiopia calling for support to any potential multi-stakeholders to promote synergies and matching opportunities. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Brilliant. Now we invite the delegate from Finland to take the floor, who's sitting in the front row in front of me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear participant. Finland welcomes this very important multi-stakeholder initiative. And as co-chair of the school meals program, Finland is very proud to support the development of school feeding systems in refugee settings. We are doing this in over 90 countries and 110 participants. Specifically, Finland will pledge €1 million through World Food Programme to support school meals for refugees in Lebanon. We wish to highlight the importance of school meals also reaching refugees, IDPs, and stateless persons. School meals programs are among the smartest investment for the future. They produce high returns in terms of education results, gender equality, health, social protection, and economic and agricultural development. Each dollar invested in school meals can yield up to $9 in economic returns. Finland has experienced the benefits of school meals. In 1943, when we were in the middle of a devastating war and a recipient of humanitarian aid, Finland became the first country to provide free school meals. School meals are a transformative social innovation and a key part of our welfare success stories. And we look forward to engaging with partners on developing school meals feeding schemes in refugee settings. We would also warmly welcome UNHCR to join the School Meals Coalition.
There you go. Thank you. Very good challenge. Thank you very much indeed. Now we'd like to invite the delegate from South Sudan who wishes to speak. I'm just looking around. If you'd like to raise your hand, then we can bring you the mic. Yes, South Sudan. No? Okay. Then we will go to Philippines. Who's here representing Philippines? Then we would like to go to Mali. Is there anybody from Mali who would like to speak? Yes, sir. Vous avez 1 minute maintenant, 1 minute.
Et bonjour à vous tous. Vraiment, je suis content d'être là. Je suis malien, mais je suis réfugié en Mauritanie. Donc, je suis réfugié depuis plus de 10 ans en Mauritanie, au camp d'Embera, donc, qui est dans l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Et je suis aussi le président de l'association Jeunes Émergents, qui est une association qui fait la promotion de l'entrepreneuriat au camp d'Embera pour que les réfugiés soient autonomes et créent leur emploi. Donc, je suis très content d'être là. C'est aussi l'occasion de remercier PAM et tous les partenaires qui sont là parce que j'ai profité de cette assistance. Je suis réfugié, j'ai profité de votre assistance. C'est aussi une occasion de vous demander encore de faire plus d'efforts dans le cadre de la formation de jeunes agriculteurs au camp d'Embera. Et aussi, il y a un impact particulier, c'est que 100% des agriculteurs en Mauritanie au camp d'Embera sont des femmes. Et elles ont un impact très, très important, mais elles ont besoin de formation et d'assistance pour pouvoir avoir plus d'impact et plus d'autonomie dans les camps d'Embera. Donc, ce message est pour vous tous, pour aider ces femmes-là qui sont en Mauritanie dans le cadre de l'autonomie des réfugiés. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much indeed. Who else would like to come in at this point with comments on what you've heard, pledges to be made, or simply messages of support? I'm just looking around. Ma'am in the front here, if you'd just like to introduce yourself when the microphone comes to you, and if you can stick to the minute, that'd be great. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, panelists. A fantastic discussion. My name is Grazia Pacillo. I come from CGIR, the Alliance Biodiversity and SEAT. We are a research organization, well, one of the biggest consortium of research organizations working on tropical agriculture. And our mission is to transform land, water, and food systems in a climate crisis. Recently, thanks also to the support of Norway and working very closely with WFP, we've launched a new initiative called Fragility, Conflict and Migration, which has a specific focus on populations such as displaced population, refugees, forced migrants that are affected by the issues of compound crisis, climate, conflict, etc. And our pledge will be announced tomorrow in a multi-stakeholder pledge for climate action, but it's essentially very much in line to what has been discussed here in terms of the producing solutions in agricultural sector to reduce and anticipate needs, mitigating the impact that climate and other security issues can produce. As our excellency from Norway also mentioned before, these compound crises are exacerbating the common drivers of fragility. So we need to be able to invest in prevention, in preventing these root causes. It is exactly what CGIR has been committed to do with this new initiative. So thank you very much for this great discussion.
Thanks so much. And Madam in the back row would like to say a word. If you'd like to introduce yourself when the microphone comes, and if you could stick to 1 minute, that would be just great. Thank you, CGIAR.
Thank you very much. I am Zanele Mlambo, the Commissioner for Refugees from the Kingdom of Eswatini. Thank you so much for the insightful discussions from the panelists and for giving me the floor. The Eswatini government pledged 1,095 hectares of land in 2021, but we are not able to implement the pledge due to financial constraints. A number of initiatives have taken place. The UNHCR Multi-Country Office, South Africa in Pretoria, has undertaken a number of initiatives for resource mobilization. I know that our project proposal, which was worked on by World Vision, is being taken through other UN sister agencies such as FAO. We want to ask for support, any form of support, should it be technical support or even financial, to ensure that the project is taken through and we're able to include our refugees into our economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for stressing that you made a pledge in 21 and haven't been able to implement, and now you would like very much partnership to help, and all understood. Anybody else wish to make? Ma'am in the front here, second row, just straight in front of me. Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Is this on? It's on. My name's Johanna Ryan, and I'm from World Vision International, and I shall try to speak to the lady in the back afterwards. We have worked in partnership with a number of the members of the panel, and I'd like to build on something that Monsieur Bourgeon, you said at the end, that agriculture is complicated. It's not simple. It takes time. And when we're talking about refugees that have, as I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, representing Norway, have said that so many of these refugees are coming out of conflict situations. We're therefore dealing with traumatized people, and very often we are dealing with child-headed households. So World Vision International is, of course, concentrated on the well-being of children. And once one starts to add the complexity of coming out of conflict, of the needs of children, the specific needs of women, with all the complexities in different contexts, then timing is absolutely critical. We can't do anything quickly, and coming into these projects and thinking through them long term all the way to working with and handing over to the private sector is absolutely essential. And another aspect of timing is that we have to make sure that as we're sequencing our activities, that we're doing them appropriately. It's unfortunate, for example, that the WFP is having to reduce its rations, and we all understand why. But if we can possibly think through the timing so that the refugee communities, and the host communities indeed, have cultivated their land, have a crop ready before the ration is reduced, then I think we can start to be a lot more effective in the way we plan and execute.
Thank you very much indeed. This has been a very dense and extremely contentful panel. I've been honoured to moderate it. I'd now like to pass to Valerie Guarneri, Assistant Executive Director of the United Nations World Food Programme, to make some concluding remarks before I just give a vote of thanks. Valerie, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you all so much, the panelists and the interventions from the floor, which have also been very thought-provoking. This has really been a rich discussion, and I think we've heard some quite significant commitments and work underway made by host governments, donors, private sector, non-governmental organizations, research institutions, really highlighting the kinds of partnerships that need to come to bear to address these complex, critical issues for refugees and other people who live in the areas where they are housed. The interventions are inspiring, certainly for me, both in terms of the impact of efforts to date, but also in terms of the significant number of pledges that should allow and need to allow us to be able collectively to expand these efforts. I think it's super important that we look at deepening and expanding collaboration and partnerships. I think in all actors who are not yet engaged need to be engaged in this space. Of course, probably in this room, we're somewhat preaching to the converted, but how do we get those who are not in this room virtually to be coming together and supporting these issues. I also wanted to highlight, Dominique mentioned the importance of data, and data is absolutely key when planning and executing agricultural interventions. It's also key to use data to document our experiences so that we can tell the story of what's working. Finland told the story of how they benefited from school meals in the past and now seek to ensure that investment is provided for refugees moving into the future. We heard from the refugee, the young man from Mali and Mauritania telling these stories. We need to be able to tell these stories also with evidence that convinces investment to be made in this area, because more investment needs to be brought to the table to support addressing the short-term needs, ration cuts, cutting populations from support is not acceptable, but it's also inevitable when needs outpace resources as they do. But investments in pulling development investments, pulling climate investments into the space that also supports refugees, host communities, and the context where they live is so key. I want to thank UNHCR for hosting the Global Refugee Forum. This has been such an extraordinary gathering. Also the work of the Multi-Stakeholder Pledge and its co-convening partners, UNHCR, FAO, WFP, the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus Coalition, Norwegian Refugee Council, and Norway for all of their efforts on the Multi-Stakeholder Pledge development and the side event, and really appreciate all of those who have submitted pledges and who are working together to advance these efforts that are absolutely essential. And thank you to David, our extraordinary moderator as well. Thank you.
Gorgeous. So it's vote of thanks time. And I always like, when giving the vote of thanks, to just ask you to take some messages away. So here they are. Keep the stories from this panel alive in your hearts and in your minds. Keep connecting with people who you don't know about, you don't normally connect with, and who don't understand these stories. And then bring the investments in, because these have a massive, lasting impact, as you've heard. So stories, connecting, and scoop in the investments. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.